This podcast is brought to you by Optimizer's Mass Zines product. Watch the video at the end of the podcast for more details.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I'd like to thank J23 for her intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show notes. My guest today is Elizabeth Yarnell. Elizabeth is dedicated to demystifying autoimmune conditions by shifting the paradigm towards inflammation. A TEDx speaker, patented inventor, I got to learn about that, award-winning author, traditional naturopath, and founder of the Inflammation Academy. Elizabeth has been featured in numerous newspapers, magazines, podcasts, and summits, as well as various networks in the Strategic Pain docuseries. Her upcoming book connects inflammation and autoimmunity. Elizabeth, welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
Thank you, Deepak. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to have you. We just recently met and we had a great just kind of meet and greet conversation, and we're like, oh, we should be on each other's podcast. We both have very interesting stories. So this is the first go around of it, I guess. Elizabeth, I'd love to ask you, I always like to ask my guests, like, how you got started in this. I know you have a story about your own. I don't want to lead the listener or the viewer, but go back as far back as you want, and like your journey to where how you got to where you're at today.
Yes. So I wasn't focused on health for most of my early life, certainly not through my school days. And I was going along as a journalist and I was working in film and video industry and as an instructional designer. And then one night, about 2 weeks before my 30th birthday, I went to sleep as usual, and I awoke the next morning blind in my right eye. And in short order, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which is an autoimmune disease that affects the way the brain communicates with the body through the nervous system. It's degenerative, it's autoimmune, and it's considered to be incurable. So this was shocking because I was just about to turn 30, and that wasn't the way I had imagined my life unfolding. In fact, my doctors at the time told me that 80% of MS patients experience significant disability within 10 years of diagnosis. So here I was just about to turn 30 and looking at, by my 40th birthday, being in a wheelchair. So that's what sent me down the road of trying to find a better solution. The doctors told me, oh, there's nothing you can do. Nobody knows why anybody gets MS. Nobody knows how to cure it. We have a couple of really, really toxic injectable drugs that you should take, even though the efficacy rates for these drugs are literally like below 20%, which means that there's a very small, what's the word I'm looking for? Small chance that they will help to slow down the progression of the disease. They won't cure it because MS is considered to be incurable. But as in exchange, you're going to have a ton of really toxic side effects, because these are really toxic, really chemotherapy drugs that are being injected into your body. And I was an obedient person, a patient in the medical system, and I started on the drugs, and I was on the drugs for about 3 years. No, I guess on and off for 5 years. For 3 of those 5 years, I had hives all over my entire body. A good day was 30 hives, a bad day was 300 hives. It was miserable, awful. And of course, the drug company, when I would call their hotline, would say, well, this is not something that we have seen reported with our drug, so it must not be the drug. Yet, when I actually went off the drug, the hives went away. So my body was really telling me it did not like these drugs at all. And so that was the last time I injected anything into my body specifically for MS. That was 2004. And since then, I've really been focused on what is causing the inflammation that is connected to multiple sclerosis and other chronic immune diseases, and how do I proactively stop it before it even starts?
Yeah. So Elizabeth, you said, they gave you 10 years, plus or minus maybe, and then you're like going to be in a wheelchair. How many years ago was that now? And because you're obviously not in a wheelchair.
I'm definitely not in a wheelchair. I jazzercise every day. Um, that was 26 years ago now, 1999.
Right. So I'm going to foreshadow a little bit here for the audience. It wasn't the 3 years on the drugs that is, it's the things we're going to get into here for the rest here. So, you
Yes.
brought up, inflammation. Talked about it in your introduction. So let's say, my audience has heard me talk about this many times before, but um, actually, maybe this is a better question. Not maybe so much like what is hidden inflammation per se, but like how would people know if they have inflammation? Like what are some of the signs? You talked about hives. I'll just speak really from my family, my mom and my sister. When they have inflammation buildup, that's their symptom that they see. That's not mine. I have other things, and maybe we could talk about that or not. But like how would you say to the audience, like if you see these, I mean it's endless probably, but like what are some big tell signs? Like you have inflammation, you need to investigate this.
Yes, it's almost endless because really what I've discovered through my investigations is that most, if not all, symptoms are due to inflammation. But let's just talk about what that could look like because it can be really confusing. And a lot of these signs and symptoms, people don't necessarily automatically connect with inflammation because that's not how we've been taught in our schools and with our doctors and our experience with the medical system. So let's just start at the top of our body. Inflammation in the head can be a headache, can be a migraine, can be foggy thinking, foggy brain. It can be eye issues. Like I had optic neuritis, went blind in my eye. That's inflammation of the optic nerve. And really anything that ends in itis, like appendicitis or arthritis, that means inflammation in medical speak. So there's a clue if you've ever been diagnosed with an itis. Inflammation in the
Can I just
nose or
interrupt? I
yeah,
100% agree with you, but like appendicitis, I never made that connection. That's the first time I've ever heard anyone say that is like an inflammatory uh,
inflammation of the
reaction.
appendix.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. But anyway, sorry for interrupting. Continue, please.
No, really. And some I don't often bring that one up because I feel like it's so logical. But you're right. It's not a chronic inflammatory issue. Appendicitis is usually an acute inflammatory issue, right? It's happening fast and quick, and you need to deal with it. Or it can literally inflame so much it explodes, and then you're toxic because all this toxicity from your appendix is now inside your body. But it's an itis, right? So appendicitis is an acute inflammatory condition. Arthritis is a chronic inflammatory condition, but they both end in itis. Gastritis is, I think, a catch-all term and kind of a cop-out if you have that diagnosis from a doctor, because it just means you have inflammation in your gastric cavity. And if you got that diagnosis, you probably already know that because you're having gut issues.
Right.
As we move down the body, we'll talk a little bit more about what gut issues look like. So sinuses, inflammation in your sinuses can look like a chronic runny or a chronic stuffy nose. It can look like if you have phlegm in the back of your throat all the time, where you're constantly throat clearing, that's a sign of inflammation. Inflammation in the chest area can look like high blood pressure, can look like um, heart issues, can look like asthma, breathing issues. Inflammation in the gut can look like uh, acid reflux. It can look like GERD. It can look like
I see that so much with clients. The
right, because
gut generally, and the presenting symptom, or at least the surface level presenting symptom, is acid reflux, GERD, etc. Yeah.
yep. So belching or burping all the time, gas coming either direction, cramping after you eat. Inflammation in your bowels can look like diarrhea or constipation, or kind of a going back and forth between the two. Basically, any type of bowel dysfunction. Inflammation in the joints, as we talked about arthritis, we could call it fibromyalgia, right? Really, inflammation can really look like anything like chronic fatigue. That is a sign of inflammation. It manifests as depression or other um, psychological ailments or illnesses, we might call them. Schizophrenia is connected to inflammation. So there's a lot of signs of inflammation that we may not connect automatically. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about this later, but one of the things that I find most helpful for figuring out, helping people understand if they have inflammation is this inflammation quiz that I offer. And that is a free quiz. I know I'm jumping the gun. It's at
Yeah, you're jumping right way to the
inflammationinvestigator.com.
end here, right to the end.
I
No, no,
know
that's awesome.
I'm like burying the lead, but this is, it's really, really helpful because a lot of these signs of inflammation, we might not think that they're inflammation. There's a sign of inflammation that I get often, not often, only if I trigger it, which we're going to talk about too, which manifests as inflammation on my eyelids, which we
Mm,
call blepharitis, right? Inflammation on the eyelids. And I know that I'm having that inflammation, not because my eyelids look puffy, but because they start itching. And when I touch them, it feels like they're sandy. And it turns out that they're actually peeling.
right,
So,
right. So
and we'll talk about what triggers that.
we've already brought it up, so let's just finish it off here. So yeah, so Elizabeth has a free gift for everyone, this quiz, inflammation quiz, so you can see some of your symptoms. And all Elizabeth's information, her contact info, the quiz, her website, everything, will be in the show notes. So we'll just get that out of the way and we don't have to bring it up again. So everything to how to contact Elizabeth will be in the show notes. I want to go back. I just want to share something really quick that's kind of new to me actually, and then ask you a question as well. We're talking
Okay.
about the throat. I didn't want to interrupt you about, if you're having to clear your throat and everything. What I have found, this is just recently because I'm doing more and more speaking events and that type of thing, that I found that, if I go any more than half an hour, 45 minutes of direct, like constant talking, I was getting like that sort of time of symptoms. And, I'm, trying all, looking at the psychological aspect and, like sprays and things like that. And then I had a conversation with a colleague and she was like, well, what foods or things are you eating that can cause inflammation or draw potentially histamine out while right before you're doing these things? And I thought like cinnamon, bananas, and I was just like, oh my god, I'm always doing these things. So I was like, right before I'm talking, so I was like, that was a big eye opener for me. Like I wasn't making that connection. So just wanted to share that for people and for you. Earlier you said, I forget which condition you said. It was like, oh, that's a cop out. They call that everything.
Gastritis.
Gastritis, right? As far as the gut. Let me ask you the same question because I've heard other people say this. I'd love to get your take. That fibromyalgia is just like another cop out term because we don't really know, so we're just going to call it that. Would you agree with that, or would you disagree with that?
No, in fact, I feel like that's a very misogynistic um, example of our modern medical community, which is very misogynistic and has been tilted toward men since the early 1900s. Very, very explicitly. We can go into that if we want to at some point too. But no, so fibromyalgia, which is kind of um, hard for doctors to get a handle on because it is pain and discomfort going on in the body. But when you look at it, if I were to give you a medical exam and to actually even put my fingers on your body, I would say, well, there's nothing broken. And I can do an x-ray and I can see that everything is where it's supposed to be. So I don't know why you're having pain. Must be in your head, must be psychosomatic. Or if you're a woman, they might just write you off as a hysteric, which is another misogynistic term that is rampant in our medical industry. But no, it's not in your head. It's really inflammation and it's being triggered. And that's what we do in the Inflammation Academy is we look to uncover just like what you did with what were you drinking or eating right before that was causing that throat clearing for you. Well, what is it that in your environment that you're eating, drinking, or breathing in, or putting on your skin, or living in, like mold, that is triggering that inflammatory action? And for you, it is manifesting as this kind of diffuse pain in your body.
Yeah. I think this may be a good point to, and I'd love to get your take on what are, your top 10, whatever, doesn't matter the number, but the top sort of secret or hidden inflammatory things, could be foods, could be other environmental, that, and some people know these, but what are the ones that like people maybe don't recognize, or that kind of fly under the radar, that people don't realize that is actually potentially inflammatory for them?
Well, I will say my number one um, top inflammatory food that people don't recognize as inflammatory are what's quote what you might see on a label as natural flavors. And I've got my fingers up in quotations if you can see me.
Yeah.
Natural
They're
flavors.
not so natural. Anyway, go on.
They're
Yes, please.
not so natural, and they are everywhere. Even in organic foods, they fly in an FDA loophole. So the nice thing is they do have to be put on a label as natural flavors, but you might be fooled into thinking they are natural. So if you see something that says natural flavors, you can be sure they're anything but natural. They may have a hint of something that once was natural in them, but they may also have 30 or more chemicals in there that the company is not obligated to disclose. And natural flavors can trigger a whole host of symptoms. We think things like these carbonated flavored waters. Oh, this is such a great alternative to soda pop, right? And they don't have any calories, and the only ingredients are water, carbonated water, and these natural flavors. Well, what could be wrong with that? Well, let's just start. If it was, say, a lemon soda and there was lemon in there, on the label, it would say lemon. It would not say lemon flavor. It wouldn't say natural flavor. It would say lemon. So if you don't see that lemon on there, and if you
Right.
see anything that says, quote, flavor, that means it's a chemical. And these chemicals are designed in laboratories, multinational companies that design them using molecules to mimic the flavors that we are familiar with that are from the natural world, but they are not natural. Now, my scientist son will tell me, Mom, a molecule is a molecule is a molecule. And if it is the molecule for vanilla flavor and the molecule in a vanilla bean that tastes the same, then those molecules are the same. And my response is, the molecules might be the same, but my body knows the difference. And in fact,
100%.
when I drink one of those naturally flavored soda waters, where the only ingredients are water and natural flavors, that's when I experience the eyelid peeling that I was mentioning
Oh,
earlier.
interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I want to highlight two things. One, just going back, I'll rewind a moment. You said, at one point something in it was natural, right? So, I'm like, and I don't know the exact definition, and maybe eat Elizabeth, it doesn't really matter, but like petroleum products are natural at some
Right.
point, and so that type of thing. And then the other point, just the last, and I've been guilty of this myself. Like you were looking for an alternative for a beverage, low calorie, whatever the case, or even like mocktails, people like doing dry October, dry January, whatever. So they want that fizzy thing, a little flavor, and that's on one hand, yeah, that's great. On the other hand, is like you're unknowingly, in most cases, adding something different. That's not all it's cracked up to be. So I think a lot of people, I see this all the time. You do as well, I'm sure. They're just like, oh, I'm making healthier choices. Well, eh, maybe, right? So
Right. And there used to be a time when this conversation I would be having right now would be against diet sodas, right? Like diet sodas are not better for you than regular soda pops. In fact, they're worse for you because they have these artificial sweeteners in them, and artificial sweeteners like Splenda, like
right.
Equal, which is NutraSweet, like saccharin. We've known about the link between saccharin and cancer since the 1970s, and it's still in diet sodas, it's still in toothpaste, it's still in sweet and low packets on the table at the diner. So just because these products are out there doesn't mean they're safe. And in fact, they're really not safe. And they don't help you lose weight. And not only that, but they contribute to increasing inflammation in your body because our body was not designed by evolution to process all these chemicals that we're putting in. And there is a correlation between the rise of autoimmune conditions, which now maybe 1 in 3 people have at least one autoimmune condition, and something like 1 in 6 people have more than 2 or 3, and the advent of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, 100%. What is one food, and we'll get into anti-inflammatory diet in a moment, but what's like one food, and maybe, even one of those, I'm air quoting here for the people who are only listening to audio, superfoods that many people actually find inflammatory. So any food or superfood that, many people be surprised, like, oh, I thought that was so healthy, that can be inflammatory for some people.
One of the worst foods or supplements that I really can't stand is whey. So oftentimes you'll see whey, Whey, inside like protein bars or powder that you would put into a smoothie to make a protein shake, or even you can get it added into a smoothie when you purchase it somewhere at a smoothie
Right.
shop. So whey is the um, byproduct of making cheese. In fact, if you remember, Little Miss Muffet sat on her tusset
I was
eating
just
her
gonna
curds
say.
and whey, right? So if you eat cottage cheese, the whey is the watery substance in between the curds. And that's fine when you're eating it all together as something in cottage cheese. But by extracting that whey and adding it in as a source of protein, I think that we are doing people a big disservice. I think whey should not be added in. Nobody needs more whey in their lives. Um, and there are other forms of protein if you are trying to up your protein intake. But I'm not a fan of whey. I think it's very inflammatory for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll just going back. I mean, going back to my university days when I used to train, very heavy, like, powerlifting type of training, etc. I mean, I had a lot going on with me. I was a mess completely. Anyone who knows my story will understand that. But I will share, doing the protein shakes, at the gym with, whey protein powder with, mixed in like in a essentially a milkshake with like milk. And, now years later, after doing all the testing and stuff, I was like, my body just cannot process, casein, whey, just dairy, in general. So it's like, and until this day, like I still like I can't do that. I have to, yeah, like find alternative protein source. It just yeah, I get multiple symptoms if I have that type of thing. So yeah, that's I think that's not one that comes up often. So I'm glad that you shared that one. So maybe what is an anti-inflammatory diet? And I know it's going to be different for people, but just generally, I'd love for you to share that with the audience.
So my mantra is whole foods are better than processed foods. I believe an anti-inflammatory diet is primarily one that doesn't contain additives. So a whole food is not, we're not talking about the grocery store. We're talking about a food that is in the same form as it was when it came off the tree or out of the ground or even off the animal. Hasn't been manipulated to add in these chemical additives, preservatives, colors, flavors, things that are unnatural for our body and our body does not like. So the Mediterranean diet is the one that I kind of refer to the most. I don't think it's necessarily universally the right diet for everybody, but in the way that it is based in whole foods and not processed foods, that is the key. So it's a range of fruits and vegetables and nuts and seeds and meats and fish and poultry. All those things are kind of negotiable for each individual, but the idea is whole foods are better than processed foods.
Yeah. And again, I don't know, you probably do some testing with your clients as well. I 100% agree with that, but then I also like to, with my clients, take another step further, like what is actually some of those, still they're whole foods, but they could be your kryptonite foods as well, and make sure we try to at least limit those, if not eliminate them altogether.
Yes. So I use a test called the MRT, which is the mediator release test. I think it is the gold standard in food sensitivity testing because it doesn't look for antibody creation, which most food sensitivity tests do, which is a very flawed way to do create an anti-inflammatory diet, but instead it looks for mediator release. mediators are things like histamines, cytokines, chemokines. Those are the inflammatory substances, chemicals really that the white blood cells release upon exposure to what they deem to be a threat. So those are released to begin the inflammatory cascade anytime there's inflammation being triggered in the body, not just if it creates an antibody, because that sometimes things create antibodies and sometimes they don't. And sometimes antibodies correlate to symptoms and sometimes they don't.
So Elizabeth, outside of, we've the last few minutes been talking about like food specifically, outside of, not having those foods that have, natural flavors and colorings, or that maybe if we do some testing that are actually triggers to our unique biology, there's obviously other forms of inflammation, environmental, et cetera. What is, like a couple things, like actionable items that, the listener or viewer can take away today of like, how can we limit the damaging effects of the inflammation that we're either choosing to put into ourselves or we have no choice over? It's just in our environment or whatnot.
Right. Well, something that you have choice over are your laundry detergents and your dryer sheets. So laundry detergents, it drives me crazy anytime I see one of those commercials that's like, oh, this laundry detergent will leave your clothes feeling so fresh. And they show somebody
I
just
hate all those
breathing in
smells.
so deeply. Those are so chemical, or aromas are chemicals too. Those are all molecules. Even though we cannot see the aroma molecules with the naked eye, they are chemical molecules. And when you are breathing something into like, oh, smell your fresh, clean laundry scent, well, you are breathing those chemicals down deep into your lungs where they can get stuck in the areola and continually cause irritation there. But if you are washing your clothes in these chemical stews, I'm going to call them, you are now living in a bubble of chemicals. Everywhere you walk, you are creating a downwind draft, almost like Pigpen in the Charlie Brown comics,
It's a
of
good analogy. That's a good analogy. Yeah.
of chemical aromas. You are sleeping and you are ensconced in chemicals throughout the night. One of my favorite things to pick on are dryer sheets. Those things are so toxic, so toxic. My family, we don't use any of those things, and we use unscented laundry detergent and soy-based and things like that. So it's fewer chemicals that we're getting exposed to, not only through the contact with our skin, but through what we're breathing in all the time. There was one time when my daughter was in preschool and we were driving the carpool, and the neighbor boy gets into the car, and his it was admirable. I mean, his mom wants to send him to school in clean clothes, but the smell of laundry detergent was so strong from the back seat where he was in the car seat behind me that I literally had to hang my head out the window as I was driving because it was making my eyes water. And I thought, this poor kid, no wonder he's having behavioral issues at school, because he's being poisoned every minute of his life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a whole, maybe a round two at some point, that whole like environment and chemicals and behavioral issues. That's a whole nother topic we could delve into for a whole nother episode. I 100% agree with you. I'm the same. If someone has a scent or a lotion or whatever and it's too strong, like it's first that first it's kind of like that brain foggy, like whoa, what just happened, to the eyes watering, and then the last thing is like I literally, like my throat is like seizing up, it's starting to get like scratchy and then tightened. I don't know, where you live up here in Canada, many of our post offices are in the back of the drugstore, and
Oh,
they design the store so you have to go through the cosmetic section before you get to the main part of the drugstore, and then the post office in the back. And it's the only time I go there is to go to the post office. I literally have to be like, and like beeline through the cosmetic store. Like they just, I mean, it's not like I go there often, but they're there waiting to like spritz you with like the whatever the thing. It's like, no, it's so bad, so bad. I don't know if it's the
Oh,
same
it's
word.
so bad. And when I feel the same way when I go to the regular grocery store and I have to walk through the detergent aisle,
Mm-hmm.
because it is so overpowering, the scent of the cleaning products that we use in our world, which are really completely unnecessary. So these multinational corporations that create all of the aromas for everything. They create the aroma for Pine Sol, they create the aroma for Tide, they create the aroma for pressed toothpaste. They create the aroma for the McDonald's milkshake. It's all the same companies, and they're all chemicals and just chemical jockeys sitting at their laboratories and moving pieces of molecules around to artificially create these scents.
Yeah, I don't know if this is true, but I've heard that, some of the top paid scientists in the world are the ones that work at food companies to make these flavors and scents and everything. And I'll just as another point is like, you know, and sometimes you don't have a choice, right? It's just like you're just I'm at the airport and I'm stuck. I need something. Although offerings are getting better at a lot of places, but you have something and you're like orange flavor, whatever the flavor, and you're like, this doesn't even taste like orange. Like I think they've evolved over time. Like that orange flavor when like I was a kid is the artificial orange flavor was more close to our actual orange. It's not anymore. So I don't know.
I think it's maybe that you've become more aware. And once you stop contaminating your body with all of these chemicals, you clean out and your taste buds changed. And now all of a sudden, even one sip of a Diet Coke tastes like vomit, even if you used to
Oh
drink a
yeah,
6-pack a week.
100%. Yeah, like and obviously we're promoting. We want to promote whole foods, but yes, absolutely, my taste buds have changed because I even just a regular apple I find so sweet now. Now that I've basically taken like almost all sugar out of my diet and that sort of thing.
And you
Elizabeth,
have to be careful about apples, right? You have to only eat organic apples.
yeah, and and I would say yes, absolutely, and grass fed, grass finished beef and whatnot. But at the same time, I understand people have to make the choices that they have to make to
Right.
for
You
feed
have
their
to do
family and
what you
everything.
to do.
Got to do what you got to
Yeah.
do. So, Elizabeth, as we slowly come to a wrap here, I'd love to know, a little bit about, being in the health field. What is your like morning routine, or what's a non-negotiable in the day for you?
Oh, that's such a good question, and one that nobody's ever asked me. What's a non-negotiable? I think I would have to say maybe brushing my teeth, flossing my teeth. That is a non-negotiable. I have to do it. And I have to do it regularly. And um, so and I don't use mainstream toothpaste. And
No,
in
neither
fact,
do I. Neither do I.
sometimes I don't even use toothpaste. It's really the action of just cleaning off the gunk that's there overnight is huge. Um, I also try to work out 5 to 7 times a week. I think that's important. If you don't use it, you lose it. And we know that exercise and weight training is hugely important for our bones, especially for as we reach middle age, to keep ourselves healthy and active for a long time. So those are maybe two non-negotiables for me.
Awesome. I love it. And you might be the first person who specifically mentioned brushing their teeth and flossing. So that's a great practice, everyone. I hope you're doing that. What is I'll give you the option here. What is something that you wish you started earlier? Or maybe, the way to put it is like, if you could go back, what could you tell, the younger Elizabeth? Like what would you share?
I think maybe I would say don't smoke cigarettes.
That's a good one.
It's not something I like to admit, but I was a smoker through my 20s. And I recently got my DNA test interpreted, and I have a gene that is very anti-inhalation of smoke. And certainly I haven't smoked for 20, 30 years now, I think, but probably shouldn't have been smoking, and I'm sure it contributed to my autoimmune condition.
Yeah, I would think so. All right, last question, and then I'll take you off the hot seat there.
Okay.
What's a last word of wisdom, or maybe a golden nugget, if you will, that you'd like to leave for the audience today?
My words of wisdom, I really think the best thing to think about is my mantra, which is whole foods are better than processed foods. And if there's only one thing you get out of today's conversation or that you move forward with, it is to try to read labels and avoid chemicals and additives and preservatives that are being added into processed foods. And you'll be able to do that very easily if you really focus on sticking with whole foods versus processed foods.
I love it. I love it. And again, I just want to reiterate, Elizabeth has a free gift, her inflammation quiz. Again, we'll have all her links and the link to the quiz in the show notes there. And yeah, Elizabeth, I want to thank you for being a guest on the Deepak Saini Show.
Well, thank you for having me. I can't wait to host you on my show, The Inflammation Investigator.
Yes, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know when this show will come out, when yours will come out. I think this will come out pretty quick, but yeah, I'm looking forward to being on your show as well. I'm going to throw it back to J23, who's going to guide us out with some music. Also, don't forget to check out today's show sponsor. And also, there's some free resources I have in the show notes as well. So again, everyone, thanks for listening or watching the Deepak Saini Show. And remember, exceptional results for the exceptional you. Until next time. Today's podcast sponsor is Bioptimizers, particularly their Mass Zymes product here. I use this every time I have a protein-rich meal or a dairy-rich meal. It's a digestive enzyme product that helps break down proteins from meat, and eggs, etc. You're having that big steak, and also dairy products. You're having the cheese, etc. So I'm very sensitive to these dairy products, particularly some of the enzymes in that. So it helps me break it down so my body can actually use it, and helps break down that yummy steak or ribs or chicken or whatever I'm having, so I can actually use the amino acids from that and help digest that food. So Bioptimizers has like 80 products in their line. I'm just talking about one here, Mass Zymes. There's Gluten Guardian, which I've talked about before if you're sensitive to gluten. They have nootropics, and they also have my favorite brand of Magnesium Breakthrough, that has all 7 forms of magnesium. And I'll talk about that another time. But Mass Zymes, if you eat meat and you want to get more from your meat, make sure you're digesting it properly and actually get the benefits you want, get those amino acids, then you definitely want to check out Mass Zymes.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company